yeah, I think generally we're getting a sort of notification fatigue, and I think it's going to be a major, and I think it already is, but I think it's going to be something that we'll develop sort of social mores around, in terms of when you can notify someone of something, and software will have it, and it'll be in a legal system. Like, I think maybe it even is in like France or Germany or something like that, where you can't, like, if a person is checking their work email after hours, then they should be paid and things like that. And I think there's a lot of questions around that sort of thing, like notification or productivity, that we're going to answer as a civilization.
Welcome to Digital Mindfulness. I'm your host, Lawrence Ampofo. On the show today, I'm here with Levi Bucsis. He's the founder and CEO of Momentum, a Chrome-based dashboard that helps people become more creative and productive by minimizing distraction. You should listen to this episode if you want to find out A, how to start a business from scratch, but also the role that software plays in our mental health, and note how notification fatigue decreases our overall productivity and creativity. But first of all, welcome to Digital Mindfulness. We bring together the best teachers, thought leaders, and companies to teach you how to be your best self in an age of digital distraction and information overload. If you're new to the show, then the best place to find out more about us is to visit digitalmindfulness.net/start, which has a collection of some required listening podcasts where we discuss everything from becoming more focused in a distracted world to habit building, overcoming digital distraction, cyberbullying, internet addiction, and much, much more. Okay, enjoy the show with Levi Bucsis. So, hi Levi, welcome to the Digital Mindfulness Show, and thanks so much for coming on. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, Lawrence, thanks for the invite.
Let's talk about you and your route to Momentum, and I'm wondering if you can just give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself, but also what inspired you exactly to start Momentum?
Wow. Okay.
Big questions.
Yeah, right. Tell me your life story.
Yeah.
And keep it short and to the point.
Short and interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so how did I get to Momentum? I guess I've been trying to answer the question of productivity or improved performance or even the creative method for a long time. And I've been cycling around those topics for the large part of my, at least, adult life. So anything from the psychology side, which I studied in university, to sort of a practical. I've been involved with technology since I was a kid, and sort of the practical side of it. And coming to Momentum, there's a number of things. So one thing, I moved out to the coast from inland, from the prairies in Canada, and I was struck with how beautiful. We lived on the coast for a bit. I really wanted to get a feeling for the rural life before I moved into the city. So we lived a little bit outside of Victoria, and we had a nice place just on the harbor. It was super lucky that we found it, and every morning I'd walk outside to walk the dog, and I would look across the harbor at the hills and the mountains, and I would just be struck with how beautiful it was. And it struck me with how timeless of an experience that is as a human, and how deeply it connects with us, and maybe even on some genetic level it connects with us, and it just has an impact. And I think there's a number of studies that have kind of shown the health benefits of looking at nature. And so I wanted to take that kind of feeling, that sort of inspiration I felt in that moment, and recreate it throughout the day so I could use it. And then I wanted to bring in a bunch of other stuff. So another thing was, I had made a little text message thing. So at the end of the day, it would send me a text like, "Hey Levi, did you go to the gym today?" And I'd say no, and it would say, "Oh, maybe tomorrow." And it was more making technology more communicative. And this was before I made Momentum. And at the same, as part of that app as well, I had this daily text it would send me in the morning. It would send me a text with a motivational quote, and then those quotes ended up going into Momentum. So those two concepts came in. And then another thing that impacted Momentum was one day I was thinking, I wonder how many hits all of the sites I've ever made have gotten. Because here I am, debating, like, not trusting myself over this decision. And maybe, my site's been visited so many times that I can get that validation and not, doubt myself over this little thing. And so I went through Google Analytics on all the sites that were in there, and it added up to something like 3 million. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. Like 3 million total hits. A whole bunch of my sites weren't tracked in there over time, but there's 3 million that I can prove right there. So, why do I doubt myself? And then, so I thought how cool it would be just to see that metric on a screen somewhere so I could get reminded of it, because a lot of what I create is digital, and it's intangible and it's transient, and it's really quickly out of sight, out of mind. And I wanted this way to kind of remind myself of what I had created. My family is a bit more tradespeople, so I was kind of used to that feeling of seeing what you create. And yeah, ironically now Momentum gets probably more than 3 million by noon in a day. Yeah, it's just a crazy kind of exponential, or I don't know how to think of it, but like, if once you start to, it's almost like the what gets measured gets managed concept. Like here, there's the first time I'd ever measured it, and all of a sudden it just exploded in terms of the outcome. But yeah, so I kind of wanted to bring all those things into one. And in a movie where they have like this far-fetched, there's like dude on a computer and it's super far-fetched, and there's like 9 screens and he's programming with like 3D blocks and putting it all together. I wanted to kind of recreate that, but in a kind of format that I could use and make, and in a daily basis. And another piece of it was there's all this great material out there, all this great information. If you get interested in like stoicism or mindfulness, you can go to YouTube and listen to entire books and like listen to like 10,000 life coaches or business coaches or therapists talk about it, and you can totally expand your mind. But then if you go to sleep and you wake up the next day and you forget about it and you kind of fall back in your old patterns, then it kind of falls down at that point. So I figured maybe the point to really make a difference was not in like putting out more information. It was like figuring out a way to kind of put that into practice better. And one example I like to go for is if you hear the stories of some actors in California, often they'll move to California on a whim, like they're chasing their dream, and they're trying to make it. And in the meantime, they're working as a waiter or waitress, and they have no money, and they're living in their car. And like, there's at some point where their will just becomes suffused with this goal and this idea. And it seemed to me like, in some sense, that is maybe part of what makes people successful, by some definition of successful, is when their entire will becomes focused on this one outcome. Maybe to the extent that they can fully believe in it or something like that. And I wanted to help create that as well, by not making the person have to do as much work or as much mental effort to get to that spot. Like, if we can kind of help provide a little bit of structure that it gets them to that spot a little bit every day, like here's a quote, here's a photo, here's your goal, maybe that can make a bit of a difference. And yeah, so that was my way of kind of taking all those things, trying to kind of simplify it and boil it down to one. And I mean, also I was working as a consultant, or I was working freelance at the time and remote. And sometimes it'd be pretty boring when I was working by myself, and I needed a way to help stay on focus. And that's also part of Momentum. So those things kind of all came into one. And I woke up, this is kind of a long-winded explanation. I woke up one morning and it was just in my head, and I sat down and the design came out. I went to a mall food court, and amongst a bunch of old people just having their daily coffee and Chinese food. And within an hour, I had designed it and sent a screenshot to, or at least the basic concept, and sent a screenshot to a buddy. And he got super excited, and he's like, well, let me start building some of this. And he worked on it a bit, and I got really busy with work. And so it was that was about a month later, and it just sat on a shelf for quite a few months, and it only ever ran on his computer for a few months. And then at some point I had finished up enough of my work, and I picked it up again and I installed it, and then I added a bunch of extra stuff to it and eventually launched it. And I thought, maybe it would get 5,000 users, maybe 50,000, and that would be sort of a thing that I could hang my hat on, and it would maybe leverage another contract for me or something like that. Like, we could use it to find more work, like build our name or something. But also it was just something that I wanted to share, and I wanted to explore the Chrome store idea. Like, maybe it would kind of market itself for me, and Yeah, so then I ironed out a few bugs over that month, and we barely had any users, maybe like 500 or something like that. And then one morning, I was on Reddit. Somebody posted it was in r/productivity, the subreddit, and somebody posted something around like, hey, what's your favorite productivity tools? And I posted a comment, hey, I made this tool with a buddy to stay focused or something like that. Check it out. And I went to sleep, and I had Twilio set up to send me a text for every install we had. And I woke up the next morning, and my phone was totally spammed out with texts of people installing it. And for the entire day, I couldn't even really use my phone because it had died because so many texts were coming in. And then once I got it back on, it was just, it could never catch up on the number of texts. And yeah, so that was an amazing experience. And it had been, I don't know, somehow it got picked up from that comment, and then it had been posted on a news site in like Norway, and then one in India, and then it just kind of spun up that way, and it just spread. And ever since, it's been crazy. I thought it was going to be a fad. I thought it would die out after a few months, and it didn't. It just kept growing. And I remember this one moment I woke up on the couch, and I'd fallen asleep on the couch, and the whole time I'd been like racking my brain, like, what can I make as a product because it was my goal to kind of make a product that could sustain me, that I could work on and what could I make? And I think Momentum had like 125,000 users at that point. And I was just like, oh crap, it's right underneath me this whole time. It's right at right under my nose. And so it took some time from that point still before it became less of a side project and more of a business. And yeah, but we did it, and it's growing now. And we figured out the monetization, which was a major struggle, a major challenge, because we didn't want to sacrifice the vision or the experience. And we feel like we're getting closer to what we want it to be. And yeah, things are good.
It's really interesting, that story that you just made, and you glossed over. You said it very, very briefly as you were talking, but I wonder if you could go into this a little bit more. That I know, obviously there were different points in your life that inspired you to create Momentum, but were you also suffering from your own productivity challenges as well?
Yeah, one thing I always think of, the concept of flow, which gets talked about a lot, and sometimes I have a hard time getting into the flow. And then I remember reading at some point, well, an important component of flow is it needs to be challenging. And that's the thing that kind of hooks your mind in. And I was like, oh man, that was like the piece that brought it all together. And maybe there's a quote we have in Momentum, which is, dream big dreams, small dreams have no magic. And I think maybe that's part of it. Like, I think if we can kind of dream a big dream for our life, it can light us up in the direction of that dream.
So some people claim that being connected all day, every day, and just they would say overexposure to digital devices, that it's these things that impact their productivity. But what would you say, Levi, are some of the biggest challenges to productivity now?
There's a lot of ways this can go. I just read an article the other day about open offices and how they interrupt productivity, just from all the distractions and everything. Yeah, I think generally in our civilization, we've never really been at the point where it's been possible to get so many notifications, so many touch points. I think usually it's been the opposite. We've been isolated, and it's been hard to be connected to other people, and everything is 2 weeks away and that kind of stuff. And now it's all instant, it's all the time, and you can talk to everyone at once. And even the way I talked with my friends, I noticed it's changed over the years by text. We used to have these like really rich and engaged conversations, and maybe part of it is that I'm getting older and people are, and I think that is a big part of it. But I think also people are also kind of developing the way they communicate in these channels, because at first it was this novel thing, and we could have these like really rich conversations by text, and then at some point it's like, well, I'm also talking to 5 other people, and I'm trying to live my life, and I'm trying to do my work and all this other stuff. And I think generally we're getting a sort of notification fatigue, and I think it's going to be a major, and I think it already is, but I think it's going to be something that we'll develop sort of social mores around, in terms of when you can you can notify someone of something, and software will have it, and it'll be in a legal system. Like I think maybe it even is in like France or Germany or something like that, where you can't, like if a person is checking their work email after hours, then they should be paid and things like that. And I think there's a lot of questions around that sort of thing, like notification or productivity, that we're going to answer as a civilization.
So Levi, let's talk a little bit more about momentum. What is it exactly, and how does it help people with their productivity challenges?
Yeah, so I think one of the big pieces is letting people set a specific focus. I think that sort of brings all kinds of psychological resources to bear when you set a goal or a focus, like over the short or the long term. So I think that's a big piece of it. And another piece is eliminating distractions. So for the longest time, I think the kind of drive behind software has been to get more stuff in. We want to have more features. We want to, show more news, and we want to show everyone everything, and they can click everywhere and do all these things, and look how productive and functional everything is. And that's great, but I think for at least some humans, that's not the way they flow. That's not the way they operate. And I think that we need downtime, and we need quiet and focus. And that's something that I wanted to bring. And also I just wanted to bring with Momentum just a little bit different of a take on what software can be. I think that it's a similar thing. Like I think the kind of legacy or the sort of momentum of technology it comes from very technical minded people and technical pursuits. And then it just sort of builds on top of that layer upon layer. And you can see it even in, like our website design was, at first it was a lot like a word processor, which was a lot like a Unix console. And it kind of just goes back and back and back. And then eventually we started to kind of rework a lot of that stuff now that sort of the functionality of it, like whether it's working or not, became a commodity. Like there was no question. And okay, so now what can we do on top of this at this new layer that we've achieved? And I wanted to bring a bit of a different take to software and to make it less accountant-y, not to pick on the accountants, but just less like sort of technical and mathematical, and more about connecting to the person at a human level, and what are their motivations, and what are the things that software can do to impact them on that level. And it's as simple as just telling someone they look good, or saying hello. Those are things that are deeply ingrained in our conscious mind, or subconscious, in our culture, going back literally thousands of years, if not millions.
And is it almost software's ability to do that, to represent things like to represent text, like in these kind of inspirational texts that you have, with these inspirational aphorisms, or representing nature? Are these the things that you're saying help people to reconnect with what's important to them?
Yeah, and I think even just saying good morning to a person and calling them by their name, I think, it has a major effect. And I think all those things, if you kind of build them up, and even just the nature of the interface and the design, if it seems to like different types of animations, for example, if it's really quick and jerky, it'll kind of suggest one state of mind, versus if it's really slow and smooth, it'll suggest another state of mind. And I think you can kind of build all of those things up into an overall experience that then sort of reinforces a certain state of mind. And that's one thing we were going for.
I love that approach to designing software. I really love that approach. Like you say, it's not accountancy. It's not about making things go faster. It's about connecting. It's not even about slowing down. It's about connecting, and I love that. And I'm really curious to know how you almost engineered that into the software, so much so that my friend was, nagging at me, Lawrence, you got to try this because it's amazing.
Yeah, and it's good that your friend is doing our marketing, because I don't think we're very good at it. Yeah, that's a good question. I think in general, it came from, part of it came from my focus on design, which is, it's not about how to make it prettier, or how do I, put lipstick on the pig. It's about how do I solve the needs of this problem, and how do I find out what the actual problem is and then solve that versus what we think it is. And I think it was kind of taking that approach and a bunch of other approaches, and trying to make something that worked for me, that I wanted to use, that would motivate me and help me focus and remind me of my goals. Because I mean, inevitably, time is passing, and whether I work on something or not, or whether I achieve something or not, the time's going to pass. So I might as well be more effective while I'm doing it.
I was going to ask about the success stories that you have, and obviously I've just told one. My friend, he absolutely loves it, and really him and his team use it to great effect. But because you started the Momentum projects with productivity in mind, but then subsequently you started to use the word connection a lot. I'm wondering, what benefits are there from people that decide to download and use Momentum?
I think maybe I default to the productivity word because that's the most common word for this in software right now. It's kind of the category. For me, it was more about, I think maybe it's kind of what I went to at the very start, was how can I kind of light myself up? How can I put wind in my sails? So it was kind of that in terms of how do I be productive. So in terms of other people, it's really a blessing. It's really an honor to hear the responses we get from some people. One that comes to mind, we got a message from someone, and they had been going through some psychological challenges, and their mental health professional had recommended Momentum as a treatment. And we hear stories like that, people. And one thing I really like is the serendipity side of it. So people, they'll message us, hey, I was having the worst day ever, and this is like literally a perfect image for me and the perfect quote. How could you know? And we don't know. It's just amazing things can happen when you kind of allow for serendipity like that and just sort of throw things out, and you get some kind of novel, new connection in that moment. But yeah, we're really blessed. We get messages every day of people that tell us of the impact that Momentum has in their life, and it's anything, like I said, from a psychological thing to they just like looking at the picture, or they like that moment of centering in their busy workday. So they'll pop open a tab and they'll get this nice photo, and it'll just kind of slow them down for a bit and remind them of what else there is in life. Maybe give it some perspective.
For me, having started this digital mindfulness project, I thought it would just stay in one space. I thought this would mainly stay in perhaps the digital and wellness spaces, right? Because, people would associate mindfulness with that. But it's just extraordinary how it's kind of gone out into, say, things like productivity, communication in general, not just the enterprise, but just people communicating to help with that. But then what was really interesting, what you just said, is about the role that transformative technologies like this have to play in things like mental health. And almost like, you have professionals who are prescribing technologies for mental health. And does that surprise you at all?
I think it surprises me that it's us. I think that I think that software can get a bad rap in terms of creating stuff like distraction and fatigue, but I think it's also amazing. And one of my the example I always go back to is like the iPhone. It's just so amazing, or the smartphone. It's just such an amazing device, and to me, the idea that we can look at Google Maps and look, at a satellite picture of somewhere else in the world, that would have been worth all the money in the world, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Literally, it would have been worth everything that could possibly be paid for. And it's just amazing that we have the ability to do that, and that it's so novel to people now.
What are some of the other things that you would recommend that other people do to improve the quality of their digitized lives?
Okay, yeah. So I think, in my life, things have changed since launching Momentum, and since, I guess, taking it more seriously as a business. And I guess maybe I look at it as a little bit of a sacrifice. So things for me have gotten a lot more hectic in terms of I can't sit in peace as much as I used to, and maybe I need to more. It's like that Hindu saying, if you're, you should meditate something like 10 minutes a day. And if you're busy, you should meditate 1 hour a day, something like that. And maybe I need actually the more white space. But it's tough with so many demands. So that's been an adjustment for me, and it's been a learning experience, having to really measure where all my time goes and make sure that I'm putting it towards something that's important. And I think even for working on momentum in general, I think for me it was a challenge in the first place because we weren't making any money for the longest time, and I had to pay the bills. And at the same time, it's like, well, if I put an hour into this contract, okay, I got a little bit of money and I can, pay the bills. But at the same time, I'm foregoing putting that hour into momentum, which, could impact like 100,000 people. So it's tough to make that decision.
It's a hard trade-off, isn't it, when you're working on something you believe in? And the reason I'm punching is because I totally identify with that, from not making any money for the longest time, but knowing that, I guess it's a question of time, isn't it? It's just a question of time and how much focus you can put into that project that is going to impact a lot of people, positively impact a lot of people.
Exactly. And I think even believing in it would at some point have a way to, like, I think if you focus on something, then eventually you'll figure out a way to make it work. And I think that's not like bulletproof advice. I think that, not that I even want it to be advice, I think that sometimes a person needs to take a step back and maybe look and make sure they're doing the right thing, and maybe there's another way to get to it. But I think at the same time, I think there's so many things that are so easy to dismiss, like, oh, you can't do that because, look, nobody's done it this way before or something. And I think that if you look to a lot of successful people, they have listened to that voice within and they've just stuck with it, and then they figured out a way. And you hear everywhere and everything, various tech companies, the investors told them it would never work. And the investors are the experts, demonstrably, because they have the cash to put in the first place. And yet they go a different direction and they make it work, whoever it is. And I think that's really important. I think, and I think that's something that I really learned, because with momentum, like, people told us so many times that we were doing the wrong thing in terms of how we were monetizing it and the direction we were taking it. And for me, it was, I wish I had listened to them less. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I just wish I had listened to myself more and doubled down on what I thought the way to go was, because it turned out that is the way that worked. And it might even be that it's just, for me, that's the way that was going to work. And that's the thing that I could believe in, and which was the thing that allowed me to achieve it.
So for example, I understand that momentum is very much positioned as a productivity tool, but the way that we've been speaking about it is, of course, it's absolutely a productivity tool, but it's almost it's being drawn into other areas of people's lives, right? Into kind of, for example, with mental health, helping people to get balance in the workplace, right? You use that idea of, you said the idea of almost like connecting people when they're in a kind of very digitized and perhaps a sterile place, or a very noisy place, like an informationally noisy place, like an open office, that by using momentum, you can become connected, connecting to what's important to you. And I'm wondering whether you think that technologies like yours within that greater genre play a role in that, I guess, are almost like important to society, not just helping people be more productive, but are actually have a greater importance.
Yeah. No, that's good. One thing I always come back to is Steve Jobs. And for him, the computer was a bicycle for the mind. And I think the thing that really brought him to it was the wonder of it, the potential of it. And I think that's what distinguished Apple products, is he was able to kind of harness those deeper needs and emotions and then infuse them into the product. And I think that also, in the sense of the hierarchy of needs, where we have survival at the lowest, and then we kind of build up, and then eventually we get to stuff like meaning and self-actualization. I think software follows the same pattern. I think that at first we need to address the most basic needs in terms of, organizing information and optimizing like certain workflows and stuff. And then I think further along, I think it eventually comes back to the human, because it's the human that's using it, and what's the human's needs and how are they more effective. And it might be that at some point in terms of the functionality, you can't really add another feature to make it perform better, but if you help the person feel better, maybe it'll work twice as well. And I think that's an important distinction to make in terms of how you quantify performance, even if you want to get into that kind of stuff, because there's this huge wildcard in the middle of everything, which is the human. And there's so many unknowns in there, and so many things that you can use.
Awesome. So, Levi, what is the future for Momentum?
What is the future for Momentum? Well, I think for the longest time it's been, how do we execute more of the vision? How do we take some of these ideas we have for what software can be and for how it can help a person, and how do we execute them? And a lot of that is having the resources to do it, which has been building the Plus version. So that's been a big focus of mine, and it's been a distraction in that sense, but it's also been a good learning experience, because I've had to learn more about operations and making sure we achieve certain things and execute certain things well. And but it's kind of led me a little bit away from sort of thinking about the bigger picture, because we're on the day-to-day kind of execution so much. So yeah, I think, I guess to answer more specifically, yeah, there's a lot more we think we can do. We can bring in long-term goals. We can bring it to a team, context, like you mentioned, your friend. There's nearby things we can do, and I'd like to take it deeper too. I'd like to have more information in it. You see it in games. A game will have like a little tip screen or something when it's loading, or a little "Did you know?" We don't really see that in software. It's sort of like you get this installed software, and then it's just kind of got this one state, and it's, you either know how to use it or you don't. And now we have this concept of onboarding. So we make sure we kind of teach the person at the very start how they need to use the software, because after you're done the onboarding, you're going to be tested from then on out, and you'll never get to see this again. So you better study it. So I think that can be better solved in terms of the software itself can be more accommodating of the learning curve. And it doesn't have to be like an on or off state, or like a single onboarding state and then not. And maybe the answer for that is AI-driven interfaces. So kind of progressively making it more detailed or functional as the person themselves develops a better understanding of the software. But that's kind of more general. For Momentum, yeah, I think we just keep on working toward the vision for it, and seeing where it takes us.
In this age of hyperconnectivity and digital distraction, what would you say are the most important human traits, and how do we cultivate those?
Human traits. I'm not sure what I would call a trait versus a state of mind or a mindset. I would say the things that I value are, I think compassion is a big piece of it. Kindness, which is probably related to compassion. And I think joy is a big thing that gets forgotten a lot. Even in the Eastern religions, sometimes I think that this concept of extinguishing the self as the path to enlightenment is, I think, bad. I think that we are individual, and snuffing ourselves out isn't necessarily the best way to go. And I think that there can be a mixture of being calm and also being excited in our individuality and the things that bring us joy, as opposed to like an agitated joy. In terms of the modern age, technological age, I think a lot of what we need to do is unplug and reconnect and refocus. And I think that that's something we've tried to put into Momentum, like a little connecting moment with oneself, because there's no shortage of, as we talked about, there's no shortage of stimulus. I mean, you can go home and literally never have to think about yourself ever. You can binge Netflix, you can drink, you can, take pills. There's all kinds of things you can do to avoid yourself. And there's a line by, I think it's John Kabat-Zinn, or it's his book or something, and it goes, wherever you go, there you are. And that's the thing, I think, that you can kind of distract yourself from yourself for the longest time, but inevitably you'll be there. And that's, I think, a big piece. And I think in that, grit and perseverance and stuff is really important around kind of entering those tough internal states, those tough inner emotions, which can sometimes feel like dying. It can feel like, it can feel really fearful, and stuff like anxiety and depression, which is more and more a thing, or at least we're recognizing it as more and more of a thing. And I think on the other side of that is those things like peace and joy and compassion and calmness and surrender. But I think it's tough to to go through that, and it's really easy in the modern era to never have to. And you can look around you and you can see all kinds of validation about why you never should. There's all this advertising, you should just do this thing, and there's always all these lives, and you can live completely vacant of exploring yourself. And I think that's really unfortunate.
Levi, where can people find out more about you and your work?
Well, there's our Momentum website, which is momentum-.com. And there's another interview I did quite a while ago, but I think that's about it. Other than this podcast, this is the first one I've ever done. So I'm kind of coming out of my shell a little bit. So, I mean, people can feel free to contact us through our website or get in touch with me on Twitter or something like that, and we can have a conversation.
Fantastic. Well, Levi, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on Digital Mindfulness, and I've learned a lot. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us.
Thanks, Lawrence, and thanks for inviting me on. I really appreciate it.